Have you ever wondered why cancer is so common, particularly in older people, and what you might be able to do to reduce your risk of developing cancer? My name is Dr. David Stewart. I'm a medical oncologist in Ottawa, Canada, and a professor of medicine at the University of Ottawa. And I recently wrote a book intended for patients called A Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks that can be purchased online through Amazon Books if you're interested. This is the first of 16 videos I'll be putting together on different topics related to cancer that people ask me about. And for further details, you can see my book. Importantly, for your own personal health care, consult your own healthcare advisors for your own personal health care. Approximately 49% of all Canadian males and 45% of all Canadian females and 39% of all American males and 38% of all American females develop cancer at some point during their life. And the reason that cancer is somewhat more common in Canada and the United States, for one reason, is that the older you get, the higher the risk of cancer. And the average life expectancy in Canada is a few years longer than it is in the United States. Americans are more likely to die young of something else. Cancer is generally caused by abnormal increase of activity of things that drive cell growth and a decrease in things that ordinarily restrict cell growth. So it's like having a car with the accelerator stuck down and with the brakes that don't work and with a fuel tank that is always full. This happens due to genetic mutations or other alterations. These alterations occur due to damage that occurs mainly during cell division. And the cell has many things to repair this damage or to prevent it from happening, but they are not perfect. Cells divide to repair old damaged cells, and your body has numerous cell divisions every day. Well, the number of mutations that occur during cell division vary from one cell to another, and they vary quite a bit, but the average is about 3 mutations per cell division. So every cell that divides, about 3 mutations occur. And the average person has about 37 trillion cells in their body, and about 100 billion of them divide every day. So with 3 mutations per cell division, that's an average of 300 billion new mutations that occur in each of us every day. The good news is that most of these mutations do not cause any major problem. The cell has a number of mechanisms to repair the mutations, and many of the mutations that occur do not result in anything of any consequence anyway. In addition to repairing the mutations, the cell also has some other ways of protecting you from getting cancer. For example, one is that if the damage is too extensive to be repaired, then that may trigger a process called apoptosis, where the cell actually dies as a direct result of the amount of DNA damage that cannot be repaired. If the cell dies because of those mutations, then that prevents the cell from dividing again and passing those mutations on to daughter cells that could then develop into cancer. Alternatively, the cell may trigger a process called senescence, where the cell remains alive but no longer divides. And because it is no longer dividing, it is not at risk of passing damaged genetic material, damaged DNA, onto daughter cells. The development of increasing number of senescent cells is a normal part of aging. It may not be pleasant to become more wrinkly and gray and stiff as you get older, but this is because of the development of senescent cells. So they're still there to support life, but they're no longer dividing, so they can no longer risk passing on damaged genetic material to daughter cells. So the actual process of aging is actually one protection against the development of cancer. The immune system also helps reduce the risk of developing cancer through a process called immunosurveillance. Your cells have several proteins, and those proteins need to be replaced. So what happens is the cell will take up the proteins in something called the proteasome and break them down into peptides. And those peptides may then be attached to another protein called human leukocyte antigen. And the human leukocyte antigen then binds to other molecules to carry the peptides to the cell surface as what is called the major histocompatibility complex, or the antigen presenting machinery. The antigen presenting machinery presents these peptides to the immune system, and if the immune system recognizes it as part of something normal to you, then nothing further is done. But if it recognizes it as something foreign, something that should not be there, then it launches an immune response to kill that cell that has that abnormal protein. However, in some cases, a cell will have a mutation that actually results in a defect in the antigen presenting machinery, so that the peptides are not presented to the immune system, so that the immune system does not recognize the cell as being abnormal. In other cases, the cell may develop defenses against the immune system, so that even though the antigen is presented, the abnormal peptides or antigens are presented, the immune system may not be capable of killing that cell. So there are various different ways to deal with all these different mutations, all these different alterations. But if enough of them occur in one cell that survives, then that's when you get a cancer cell. So again, if you have enough things, that gives you the equivalent of having the accelerator stuck down, brakes that don't work, and a fuel tank that's always full. That's what is needed for development of a cancer. Because everybody develops mutations for every day that they're alive, the number one risk for developing cancer is just getting one day older. And anything that increases the development of mutations, or that interferes with the ability to repair those mutations, anything that does that will increase the risk of developing cancer. So many things can increase the number of mutations by increasing the damage to DNA. Things like tobacco smoke, alcohol, red meat, processed foods, air pollution, asbestos, sun damage from excess exposure to the sun, radiation, inflammation, all of these things can increase the number of mutations by increasing the amount of damage done to the DNA. For many of these things, exposure earlier in life has a higher impact than exposure late in life, but even exposure late in life can increase the risk of cancer. But if the damage occurs to the DNA early in life and that cell survives, then as that cell keeps on dividing, further changes may occur that will eventually result in the production of a malignant cell. With all of the things that can increase DNA damage, a little bit of exposure carries a little bit of risk. A lot of exposure carries a lot of risk. And none of us can completely avoid exposure to things that will cause mutations. It's inevitable. It's just part of living. But if we can limit the exposure, if we can decrease it, then that helps reduce the risk of developing cancer. And also, just part of enjoyment of life, you may elect to have exposure to some of these things from time to time. So for example, having a nice steak with a nice glass of wine may be very enjoyable. So it does very, very slightly increase your risk of developing cancer. But as long as you don't do it every day, then the risk is lower. And in fact, the less frequently you do it, the lower the risk, but there's always some risk. So again, the key with all these things is moderation. If you only expose yourself a little bit to things that can damage DNA, then there's far less risk than if you have a lot of exposure. However, even if you avoid all exposure to these things, you are still going to have mutations because of just, again, getting one day older. So you cannot completely protect yourself. Actually, it's been very darkly observed that if you really want to reduce your risk of cancer, you just die young of something else. But of course, that's not a very good idea. So you just go on, you have a good life, but you just try to limit your exposure to things that will increase DNA damage. Some viral infections can also increase the risk of cancer, either by causing chronic inflammation or by introducing abnormal genetic material into the cells. So examples of hepatitis B and human papillomavirus, those are two that can increase the risk of development of cancer. But for both of these, there are vaccines available that reduce your risk of getting those infections with those viruses, and so can thereby decrease the risk of developing cancer from them. Because there are an average of 3 mutations per cell division, anything that increases the number of cell divisions can also increase risk. So eating too many calories and being overweight increases the risk. In addition to increasing the number of cell divisions by being overweight also increases the amount of inflammation. And inflammation is important in causing cancer. So important to try to limit calorie intake and to also try to avoid becoming overweight. Also, regular exercise, and doing anything you can to decrease the risk of obesity will reduce the risk of developing cancer. So in women who undergo menopause, giving hormone replacement therapy can help greatly improve the quality of life by reducing menopause symptoms. However, they do also increase the cell divisions in breast tissue and endometrial tissue. And so this can slightly increase the risk of breast cancer and endometrial cancer. And again, the duration of exposure is important. So typically when the hormone replacement therapy is given, it is only given for a few years rather than a long period of time. So the hormone replacement therapy can have a major positive impact on quality of life by reducing menopausal symptoms, but with a small amount of risk associated with them. Anything that interferes with the ability to repair DNA damage will also increase the risk. So these are commonly things that are inherited. So if you inherit a mutation in the genes BRCA1 or BRCA2, for example, those two genes are important in DNA repair. So if you do have mutations in them, your cells may have an impaired ability to repair DNA damage, and that increases the risk of ovarian cancer and breast cancer, prostate cancer, and pancreatic cancer. And also there are a variety of other inherited susceptibilities as well. Many of which do deal with some aspect of decreased ability to repair DNA damage. Eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables helps reduce risk, but we don't know for sure why. It may be just because if people who eat lots of fresh fruits and vegetables may be more likely to eat fewer calories, or they may eat less processed foods and less red meat. So that could be it. Or there could be something directly in the fresh fruits and vegetables that helps protect a person. We don't know for sure. At one point, we thought it might be antioxidants. So a lot of studies were done looking at the ability of giving extra antioxidants like selenium and vitamin A derivatives and vitamin E to see if they would reduce the risk of developing cancer. But all of those studies failed. None of them showed a reduced risk of development of cancer. And in fact, the risk of cancer was actually increased with some of them. And it was thought that maybe these antioxidants may actually help protect cancer cells and promote their growth. So that whatever it is in fresh fruits and vegetables that helps protect us from cancer, it does not appear to be the antioxidants. So I mentioned that there are vaccines against viral infections that can cause cancer. How about other vaccines to prevent cancer? At this point in time, nothing on the horizon, nothing that we have, and also no cancer prevention pill of any kind that we can take. Low-dose aspirin slightly reduces the risk of development of bowel cancer, or it may, but it also carries risk of bleeding and things like that. But overall, there is no cancer prevention pill that we can take. But a lot of research is underway to try to find something that will decrease the risk of developing cancer. In summary, this video discusses why cancer is so common, particularly in older people, and also some ways that you can reduce your risk just by reducing exposure to things that would increase the DNA damage. And the other good thing about reducing exposure to things that cause DNA damage also directly accelerates aging, so that if you avoid a lot of exposure to those things, not only do you cut your risk of cancer, but also you slow down the aging process and stay young longer. On this and other aspects of cancer, if you want further details, you can see my book, A Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks, that can be purchased online through Amazon Books. So overall, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you have found it helpful. Thank you.